Okay, I think we're working now. I'll give you guys a few minutes to see if you guys can get over into this video. I had a few problems with the live stream this morning, and I wasn't able to get any audio going. And so the people that were over in that stream, I hope that, okay, yeah, here we go. I hope you guys come back over here. I see Gray's in the chat now. So, yeah, hopefully there was a couple people over there. They can figure out to close it out or stop that and then come back over. I don't know if when I closed the stream over there, if it like kicked you guys out of it or what, but, I don't know what happened. My microphone and audio, everything, nothing was working in terms of the audio. I had to unplug everything. I couldn't even restart it. I had to unplug everything and plug it all back in. And suddenly, for some reason, it came back on. So thank you all for having the wherewithal to stick with me through my technological incompetence. So I appreciate that, because today's a fun paper. It's a real quick paper. So even though I'm starting a little bit late, we'll still be done probably by 11. It's not that long of a paper. It's only 2 pages, actually. So welcome to the Turfgrass Epistemology YouTube and podcast. Had a little computer problem getting started this morning, but we're starting now. So this podcast is about turfgrass epistemology. We're trying to figure out and trying to pursue the question of how do we know what we know. So generally what we'll do is we'll go over in a scientific paper and walk through it, try to explain it in layman's terms as to what the content means and how it can be used and so forth. So if you're looking for science to kind of guide you, this is the place to be. So let's get started. So the paper we're going to talk about today is this paper here. Let's see if I can, oops, this needs to be closed. I am not very, okay, here we go. Okay, so the date of seeding affects establishment of cool season turf grasses by Reicher et al. In 2000. This was published in Hort Science. So what we've been talking about over the last week or two is turf grass establishment. It's that time of year. It's for cool season grasses. It's that time of year. It's September. We're moving into October here soon, and there's a lot of people out putting seed out, a lot of people fertilizing and watering and these things. And so I thought this might be a relevant topic for this time of year. And so we've talked about nitrogen a little bit. We talked about phosphorus a little bit. Next week, we're going to talk about phosphorus a lot. I think all the papers next week are phosphorus, applying phosphorus during establishment and what you should and shouldn't do and what rates are appropriate and so forth. So we still have a few papers to get through in the world of turfgrass nutrition during establishment. So next week's very little to do with nitrogen and a lot to do with phosphorus. So on this paper, we're talking about when you should apply it, or when you should seed the turf grass. So if you've not gone out yet with your seed and it's September and whether you're in Kentucky or Tennessee or Minnesota or wherever you're at and you have not yet seeded, this paper will hopefully convince you to do it pretty quick. And sometime I'm going to get rid of this cough. I hope sometime soon. Anyway, this is a really short paper, really quick. I'm probably actually going to read most of it or go through because it's really short. It's not going to take that long to get through. And so let's get started. So this paper is open access. Anything in the ASHS, the American Society of Horticultural Sciences, is open access. So you can go to ashs.org and search all their papers they have, and it's all open access now. They've switched that, I guess, some years ago to where now anybody can get the papers for free. So you can not only read the abstract, you can get everything there for free. So let's just read a little bit about the introductions to set the stage. The optimum time for seeding cool season turf grasses is mid-August through early September, according to Beard in 75. He had that. Turfgrass seeded at this time will develop a dense stand and will usually withstand the stress of winter in the Midwest. However, construction schedules often require seeding in late fall, winter, or spring. So what he's saying is that Normally September, late August, early September is a good time to seed, but sometimes logistically you can't get it done then. Sometimes you have to seed later. So although dormant seeding of turfgrass was mentioned in textbooks, so we're talking about seeding in November, December, January, dormant for cool season grasses, few scientific reports exist documenting the efficacy of seeding at less optimum times of the year. Okay, so right there, you understand what he's talking about. Normally, you'd like to do it in August, September, but if you can't, you have business, or logistically you're doing something, or you're on vacation, or whatever the case is, and you can't do it till later. We need some data as to what will happen when we do it later in non-optimum times. He provides a few citations from the past literature about this. This 1986 paper reported that dormant seeding Kentucky bluegrass in November was preferable to seeding in December, February, or March in Iowa, but not as effective as seeding in September. So this prior author here found that September was best. November, if you had to, was okay, and it was much better than seeding it even later in December and January. Okay, it actually did this over snow in that particular study. Hull and 48 reported that Hull and 48 reported that survival of seedlings of several cool season grasses was low when planted later in the fall, but survival of fall and late fall seedings was still superior to that following spring seeding. So in other words, Hull and 48 said it wasn't great in late fall, but it was still better than the spring. Okay. Dormants. Okay, we're not going to go into that. It's fertilization of turfgrass seed beds is common practice. Application of phosphorus increases seedling roots and top growth, especially in soils low in phosphorus. Now, this statement is not entirely clear. Don't take that literal. There, like I've mentioned already, is clear evidence that the application of phosphorus can hasten establishment and increase turf quality even after establishment in low P soils. Very low phosphorus soils are prone to show a response to the application of phosphorus. But in medium to high phosphorus soils, the application of phosphorus during establishment or even after establishment has very little chance of showing a response. So yes, this is true, but be aware they're talking, although they didn't identify it, I'll identify that this is specifically in low phosphorus soils, okay? Application of nitrogen to seed beds will also improve seedling establishment as long as phosphorus is adequate. Okay. However, fertilizing at non-optimum times hasn't been reported. The two objectives of the study were to document the success of seeding Kentucky bluegrass, ryegrass, and tall fescue at less than optimum times of the year, and to determine if nitrogen phosphorus fertilizer requirements of Kentucky bluegrass differ with seeding date. Okay. So right there is the setting. We have 3 turf grasses. They're going to seed them at different times of the year. And for the Kentucky bluegrass, they're going to look at the nutritional requirements of nitrogen and phosphorus during this time. They did this in 1989, and they did this in Indiana. Okay, the Agronomic Research Center in Indiana. The pH, this is always important. The pH was 7.1, the CC was 21, the organic matter was 4.7, and the phosphorus was 90 kilograms per hectare. Okay, so if we do a quick calculation, kilograms per hectare, you guys are probably used to seeing parts per million or milligrams per kilogram or something like that when it comes to phosphorus. In this particular case, he has it in kilograms per hectare. Now, I already know, that this is roughly considered adequate, but let me walk you through it. So if it's in kilograms per hectare and you go, it's 90, so I'm good because I know whatever 30 or 40 is probably adequate. Well, that's 30 or 40 parts per million, not necessarily. I mean, you're seeing 90 kilograms per hectare, so be aware of the units. So we're going to change kilograms per hectare to, you can do parts per million if you want. I don't know if there's a calculator for that. Kilograms per hectare convert to parts per million. I don't know if they're going to have that or not. So it says divide by 2, which is, I was going to change it to pounds per acre and then divide by 2. So in this case, it says it would be 45, but let's do convert to pounds per acre. and we're going to come up with kilograms per hectare is 90. And so the pounds per acre would be 80 point something. So 80 pounds per acre of phosphorus. And in that case, you divide it by 2. So they said divide it by 2 as well with the even if it's in kilograms. In any case, it's 40 to somewhere in the 40 range of phosphorus. Now, they don't give me, in this paper, they don't tell me the extractant that they used. In Indiana, in prior research, they tend to use the Bray extractant. I don't know if that's the extractant they used here, but we're going to assume it is, I guess, unless someone can show me where there's an extract. I've read this. I don't see the extractant they used, but anyway, we're talking about the medium range, the medium range, 40 to maybe as high as 45 parts per million phosphorus using the Bray P extractant. I'm assuming that's the Bray P. Okay. So be aware, this isn't 90 parts per million, it's kilograms per hectare. So you might go, oh, I'm really high in phosphorus. Well, in reality, it's a different unit. So we're going to continue. So we're dealing with a soil in Indiana that is, by my estimation and opinion, it is medium in terms of its soluble or phosphorus extracted phosphorus. So I wouldn't consider that to be low. I wouldn't consider that to be a soil that is likely to show a response to the application of phosphorus, although potentially it could, but it's not so low that you would definitely set off alarm bells. Okay, it's in the medium range. Okay, let's see what they did. Percentage of cover was rated visually throughout the study. Crabgrass cover was also rated visually in August. Okay, so they have these grasses. They're putting them out during the, well, let's talk about the different months. Seeding date times year interactions were also significant. Thus, the data are presented for each year. Remember, in the past, we've talked about when there was no interaction, they pull the data together. In this case, they're saying there is an interaction, and so they separated the years and showed the years independently. Okay. So species, they use Ram 1 Kentucky bluegrass. I'm just going to go through here. It doesn't really make much of a difference to me. So what is important is this. These grasses were seeded on 1st of September, October, November, December, March, April, and May. Okay. So the first of the month on September, October, November, December, March, April, and May. They seeded these. That's a fixed effect. They have some plots that have already been seeded by the time they seed the other one and so forth, and they're continuing to seed more, each month. Immediately prior to seeding, nitrogen at half a pound of nitrogen and phosphorus at a little less than a half a pound of nitrogen were applied using handheld shaker bottles to each plot. So prior to seeding, they gave it a little nitrogen, a little phosphorus for the turfgrass study or the species study, whatever. For the fertilizer study, Kentucky bluegrass was seeded at 96 kilograms per hectare on September 1, November 1, March 1, and May 1. So we have a little bit of differences in the seeding dates for the fertilizer study, but it's still September, November in the fall, and then March and May in the spring. Here we go. Here's the nutrient stuff. Each plot received a starter fertilizer with all combinations of nitrogen and phosphorus rates. Fertilizer sources used were 4600, so urea, and a 020. Rates of nitrogen, I'm assuming this is concentrated superphosphate, but that's an odd percentage for that. I'm not sure what the source was on the phosphorus, but it's only phosphorus they applied as for the phosphorus. Rates of nitrogen were 0, a half a pound, and 1 pound of nitrogen, and the phosphorus rates were 0, a little less than a half, so maybe a third. I don't know what that number is, and I haven't done the conversion. About a third, and then maybe 3/4 of a pound in. Okay. And then they say fertilizers applied chicken. So that's the setting. They have 3 different nitrogen rates, 3 different phosphorus rates for the fertilizer study, and then they have several different species of turf at different months for the application date study. Component of the study. Okay, results and discussion. We're almost over already. This is an extremely short paper. This is the last page, so we'll look at some graphs to have them make a little bit more sense. Okay, seeding Kentucky bluegrass on September 1 produced up to 68% cover by December 1st, whereas if you waited until the next month, October 1, a maximum of 7% cover occurred by December 1st. So right there. And we're going to see this in the graphs, a difference of 1 month for Kentucky bluegrass resulted in a reduction in cover of more than 60%. It's like whatever it is, 90% reduction. What is that? Let's do the math. 7 divided by 6. We're looking at a 90% reduction in the growth, the cover of the plot that would have occurred. So 68% from one, 7% if you waited for a month. That's how important the timing is for Kentucky bluegrass in Indiana. You don't want to wait until October, November, or mid-October and go, oh, it's Halloween and I got to put this out. I forgot. I guess you could. You'll see what will happen if you do that. But doing it at the beginning of September makes a major impact. It has a major impact on the establishment of that grass. Therefore, seeding a slower germinating species like Kentucky bluegrass as early in the fall as possible is essential in order to achieve an acceptable stand by winter. So he makes it clear that you need to seed it early. Okay. Now, here's the graph. I don't know if I can zoom in on this and it's going to actually stay on the page or not. Let me see if I can zoom. Yeah, I can. Okay. So right over here we have percent cover, and it says the effect of date of seeding Kentucky bluegrass in the first year and the second year. So the top graph is the first year, the bottom graph is the second year, and the percent of cover in subsequent months. So this white bar is when they seeded it in September, okay? And they did the rating in December, okay? So all these bar colors are the different months that they seeded the grass. And the x-axis is the month that they rated them. So if you seeded it in September and you rated it in December, you see right here this 58 or whatever, 60, it's hard for me to read that, percent cover. Okay. And the other ones are, this is Kentucky Blue. And the other month at this point was only October, is essentially 0. That's what they just said in the text in the first year. In the second year, they saw something very similar. Okay, I guess this is the 68 and this is the 7 that they talked about in the text. Okay. The first, and then let's just say in the first year. The first year, if you seeded it in November, December, or March or April, you can see what happens here when they rated it in May. So if you seeded it in September, you're already at 60, 70% cover in May. But if you're waiting, you see that these the influence is substantial. If you waited just 1 month, in the first year, we're in May now. I seeded it in September. Last September, I'm at 60, 70% cover. If I waited a month in October, I'm at only 40% cover. So that's a biologically significant reduction just by waiting 30 days. Okay. And the second year was even more profound of an impact. Okay. You can see the value of seeding in September in the second year was much greater than in the first year. Okay. In the first year, they actually did get eventual full coverage and it was all equal. By July and August, these were basically all the same. Okay, regardless of what month you seeded it, they were essentially the same. But in the second year, September is still resulting in a significant increase in cover relative to seeding them later. Okay, so if you've ever heard, oh, you want to seed September, don't seed later than October 15th or whatever. That's true. I mean, this is why, because the early September, the earlier you get out is the better off you are. I'm sorry, Gray, I just saw your question. Isn't 21.5 CEC very high? For a native soil, I mean, it's high, yeah. It's not unheard of, but, generally things in the CECs in the teens are I would consider 15, 16, 17 sort of in the high range, and this is 20, so 21. So yeah, it's high. I wouldn't be overly concerned about it. As always, I'm not concerned about any number unless I'm convinced that it's actually having an impact on the turf grass that I do not want. In this case, CEC, you can use it as a piece of information to potentially diagnose issues if they ever come up. Like if, say, you're applying potassium and you're not seeing a response. Well, that wouldn't even work because high CEC, you're probably going to have a lot of potassium already in the soil. But yeah, CEC of 21 is probably on the upper end of average. Yeah. Okay, let's continue. So that was the seeding of Kentucky bluegrass by month. And you can just really clearly see the value of seeding early. But you can also see that you can achieve establishment if you happen to seed late. This in the first year you were able to do that. In the second year, it wasn't so much able to do that. Okay, so this is why we do multiple years, because there's a difference between these 2 years in terms of establishment if you seeded late. If you seeded early, you still saw an increase in both years, but if you seeded late, there's a difference in the second year. So who knows what caused that, but certainly there is a risk you're running of not achieving full acceptable coverage if you wait after September on Kentucky bluegrass. Okay. You all know this, but some people might not. The seed germination rates differ greatly among species. So like perennial ryegrass will germinate really quickly, which is why seed companies and big box stores put it in blends. Even though they know it's going to die, it'll get a quick germination, and the customer, the homeowner who doesn't know any better, is going to go, oh, it germinated and it's looking good. Meanwhile, the other seeds in the blend are probably what you're looking for long-term, like tall fescue or bluegrass or whatever. And so while that quick germination occurred, the customer, the homeowner, might be content because they're seeing it. But the value of the blend is probably in the other seeds, the bluegrass and the tall fescues, that will be there for a very long time. But those take a very long time to germinate. Tall fescue on a normal September, it would take 10 to 14 days to germinate. I seeded mine early because I wanted to seed it when the soils were still warm, and I got germination in about 6 or 7 days, which is still probably twice as long as ryegrass would germinate. Okay, bluegrass is even slower than that. So bluegrass could take a long time to germinate, and so you don't really want to wait with bluegrass or tall fescue to germinate in October and November if you don't have to. Okay, perennial ryegrass seeded on September 1 produced commercially acceptable cover 90% on December 1. Seeding perennial ryegrass in October did not produce commercially acceptable stand by December 1, but plots filled in quickly following the spring in both years of the study. Okay, and that's down here, I think. Where's perennial ryegrass? Right here. So perennial ryegrass, the graphs for perennial ryegrass are here. It's the same graphs as you saw just a minute ago for bluegrass. Now this is perennial ryegrass that we're looking at here. Let's see if I can get it on the screen a little bit better. Having difficulty with this today. Yeah, I'll have to just zoom out a little bit. I'll just zoom out. So this graph right here is what I'm talking about. See if I can. I can't. I'm talking about this graph right here. Okay. So you can see here that the Fiesta perennial ryegrass seeded in September germinated quickly and was able to grow in by December 1st quicker, just like the bluegrass did. But we see a much higher germination rate on the ryegrass than we did on the bluegrass. But you also see all of them had grown in, regardless of whether you seeded in September, October, November. All of them had grown in to acceptable limits by June of the following year. In the first study, in the second study, you see a lot more fluctuation, but you still see much greater establishment rates of perennial ryegrass than you did in the bluegrass. So if you wait with perennial ryegrass, it's not necessarily as detrimental or concerning as it was with bluegrass, which is slower to germinate. Generally it's slower to germinate. Okay. But still, there's benefits to applying perennial ryegrass in September compared to October, November, December early on. Okay. So if you want to get the seed down and you want to see some establishment before Christmas, you need to do it in September. You don't need to be waiting until October. There really is a profound slowing of the germination and establishment by waiting that extra month. You don't, unless you have to do it, don't do it. In this case, they're saying sometimes you have to do it. What happens if you have to do it? In this case, it'll still grow in eventually. Okay? Let's go back up to the text. Tall fescue must be seeded in early September to achieve commercially acceptable cover before winter and the best turf cover of the following year, figure 5. So now we're going to go down here to figure 5, which is the next one, which is this one right here. Now we're talking about tall fescue in this graph. So now you see the difference between perennial ryegrass on the left and tall fescue on the right, okay? And you can see the difference in bluegrass up here. You see the difference in bluegrass, which was much slower to germinate in the second year, even in the first year, than the other grasses, okay? So this tall fescue here is what generally I'll deal with homeowners. you can see that if seeded in September, you're good in December. But if you wait till October, that extra month really does slow things down before the onset of winter. Okay. The first year we did see it eventually did have full coverage in, regardless of the month you seeded, by July. So if you had to wait with tall fescue, again, you're like the other grasses, you're still going to have some decent establishment the following year. The second year saw a lot more fluctuation in the months. Okay, so there's going to be variability year to year. You might get full coverage, you might not get full coverage, but there's a pretty good chance that even if you wait, you'll still have acceptable coverage, whether you're using perennial rye, tall fescue, or bluegrass. You'll still probably end up getting decent coverage, even if you wait until those later months. Okay, so this is sort of like an whoops, I messed up. I didn't seed early enough. Now, what happens if I seed late? Well, if you seed late, you're probably still okay, but you're going to have to wait, until June or July or August of the following year before it finally catches up to what would have occurred if you seeded in September. Okay. So that's the seeding date stuff. And that's all good and important and all that stuff. But what I'm interested in is the fertility. So, and here you can see the value for crabgrass establishment as well. We don't want crabgrass, right? So let's go to the crabgrass population rated in August were lowest following seeding in September and highest following seeding in April and May. So here's a detrimental effect. They're saying that here's September, the same scale, September, October, November, and here's Kentucky bluegrass, perennial ryegrass, and tall fescue. And you can see the white line of September, the white bar of September, and it goes further. So up. So each bar is the next month they seeded or sowed the seed. Okay, and you can see the presence of crabgrass is substantially higher biologically and statistically if you wait into those months. So early seeding provides a bit of competition for the other seeds that are already in the soil, like crabgrass, to come in and start taking over. So that's an additional benefit to seeding early. Okay, you're going to you very likely have lower crabgrass infestation than if you wait. Okay, so now we get to the fertilizer study, and you can see we're already done. There's only 2 more paragraphs. It's very short, but I highlighted the whole thing. Make sure you can see. Okay. There were no significant interactions between seeding date and nitrogen or phosphorus treatments. Data not shown. So it didn't matter what date you went out with the fertilizer. The response was the same. Okay. So what response was that? Let's read. Data throughout 1990 and 91 revealed large effects of seeding date on establishment, but no agronomically important effects from the fertilizer treatments. So, where have we heard that before? Okay. The fertility of the silt loam soil of the research site may have been high enough to mask the response of added nutrients. Let's just finish this and I'll go back. Turner and Waddington, 83, which is a paper we already covered, reported that P applications to seed beds are most beneficial when soils are inherently low in phosphorus. And phosphorus soil test levels as low as 60 kilograms per hectare, so that'd be around 30 parts per million, around that number, will allow seedlings to develop normally when rapid establishment is not needed. Phosphorus levels in our soils were 90. So they're saying their soil was already very fertile, had phosphorus levels in excess of what prior research has suggested was needed. Their levels were already higher than that, and adding more didn't help. Okay, and so I know that we've sort of been indoctrinated into believing you need to apply a starter fertilizer. Even you'll see it even in research papers where we're doing a study and we're growing it we're doing a study on something else. Let's say, I don't know what it would be, say species differences or whatever. And so we got the soil ready, we got the area ready, and we added a starter fertilizer to all the whole study area before seeding. Meanwhile, The study area had, 80 parts per million Mehlich 3 phosphorus. They didn't need to do that. But there's a conviction in a lot of our industry that you must apply starter fertilizer to increase establishment. And I don't know where that comes from, but there clearly are papers that show that. But those are almost always on low phosphorus soils. Okay. On soils that, in this case, they're saying from Turner and Waddington, saying that it was less than 30 parts per million. I don't know if that was Mehlich 3 or Bray. I think that was Bray too. I can't remember. You can go back and look at that video. But they're in the 30 to 40 part per million range, and they're not seeing a response to adding phosphorus in terms of any benefit to turf establishment. Okay, so I've said this before, maybe in a different way, but it really should be nutrition and turfgrass really should be to opt out of, to opt into fertilizer. In other words, you don't apply anything at all, and then you opt in to applying nutrients whenever you have a good reason. And the good reason is not, well, I'm seeding, so I need to apply starter fertilizer. That's a really bad reason. That's a horrible reason. That's an indoctrinated reason. Okay. The reason should be that you have, prior to seeding, you've taken a soil test, and the soil test indicates you have very low phosphorus. I don't like soil testing, but in cases where the turfgrass isn't growing well, it's valuable. Okay. And in this case, there's no turfgrass growing. So you don't know whether it's going to grow well or not. You have no idea because there's no turf there yet. So in that case, you take a soil test. It's useful to see what you're dealing with. And if the phosphorus is low, say 20 or below on Mehlich 3 and even Bray, then you probably would want to err on the side of caution and apply some phosphorus so that you wouldn't experience a deficient establishment response. Okay, but really, the soil test oftentimes is better to show you when not to apply it. It really. So if you take a soil test and you go, well, how do I interpret this number? Well, if it's 50 or 60, you have an extremely good chance of never seeing a phosphorus response during establishment. If it's 50, 60 or higher, Mehlich 3. And even in this case, Bray, they had a 40 on a Bray. They didn't say the soil test extractant, but I'm pretty sure they used Bray. They had a 40 on a Bray and didn't see any benefit to applying fertilizer. So economically, if you're a capitalist, like I hope we all are, economically, you're losing money by buying fertilizer and putting it out. Environmentally, you're increasing the risk by buying fertilizer and putting out when you don't need to. Okay, so it's a win-win in both scenarios, whether or not whichever hat you wear, whether you're an environmentalist or a capitalist. I'm not saying you can't be both, but phosphorus doesn't need to be applied during establishment unless the soil phosphorus is already low. Okay, this is another paper showing that. Okay, and next week we're going to show another 2 or 3 papers that essentially say the same thing. There's a paper, I think it was in Pennsylvania, where they did start a fertilizer work and found the same thing, and nothing happens. Okay, because their soil phosphorus is already sufficient. Okay, so let's do this last paragraph summary. August or September is the optimum time to establish cool season grasses. Make a good statement like that, guys and gals, whenever you're writing papers. If that's what your results found, then say it. You don't need to be ambiguous in the conclusions. If the results and the data support it, make a firm statement. And I know it's not easy, and I know, you don't feel comfortable sometimes making such a strong claim and all these things. And, you want to be able to, work your way out of it if something strange happens. And I understand that. But if your results show that August and September were resulted in greater establishment rates by December, then just say that. And that's what they do here. August and September is the optimum time to establish cool season grasses. Now, you might want to, contextualize that saying, in Indiana with these grasses, but be confident that, if you make a statement like that, just have the data support it. Have in this paper, dormant seeding Kentucky bluegrass and tall fescue in November, December, or March will hasten establishment compared with spring seeding. Okay. Late fall or dormant seeding perennial ryegrass might not be justified because of winter kill potential. Varying the rate of nitrogen and phosphorus applied to the seedbed on fertile soils did not affect establishment regardless of seeding date. Okay, so we're going to go back to me now. So those conclusions, I like those conclusions. As long as you have the results and the data support the conclusions, I don't see anything wrong with making firm statements and conclusions. You got to frame it correctly so that the people understand that you're not talking about all cool season grasses on the entire planet. I mean, it's within the boundaries of this study. What they found, and in what they found, August and September is the best time to seed. And applying nitrogen and phosphorus in this case on these soils, on these turf grasses, didn't help. Remember, the soil phosphorus level was around 40 parts per million on, I think it was Bray. Okay, so if you have a similar situation, you're in the Midwest in Indiana, you're seeding these grasses, go out now and get them out now. Don't wait. Stop what you're doing. If you want to seed tall fescue and bluegrass or rye or whatever, there is a benefit to getting them out now. But if you, for some reason, can't do it, or your tractor broke, or whatever the case is, you can't physically do it, and you have to wait until you get the equipment back running again, or you have time in your schedule to get out there and get the round done, you can still do it. Just make sure that you inform your clientele that I'm doing this in October, or I'm doing this in November. Make sure that you set the expectations with them that your neighbor across the street seeded in September. Their lawn's going to look a little bit more filled in relative to yours. But there's a really good chance, very likely, that given the spring and given until June or July, both your lawns are going to be fine. It's not something to lose, sleep over. It's still going to grow in. It's just going to grow in a little slower. Oh, Mr. Landscape Professional, you guys aren't applying any phosphorus or nitrogen to my soils. Yes, that's right, because we already took a soil test. Your phosphorus is so high, you don't need to apply phosphorus. Okay, and I don't know if you're legally allowed to do that in all cases, where if the phosphorus is high, can you still apply it? I don't know. But if they say, well, I know it's high, but I still want you to apply phosphorus, as long as you can legally do it, okay, I wouldn't do it. But as long as you can legally apply phosphorus, even in locations where the phosphorus has already been documented to be sufficient, well, you just need to let her know. Your client, I say her, whoever, the homeowner, know. This is what I do. It's like, okay, I'll charge you for it. Here's what it's going to cost you, $50 or $100 to apply this, whatever the number you charge them for them. I'm just letting you know that in my opinion, you're probably not going to see any benefit to applying this. It's going to cost you money, and you're probably not going to see anything for it. But if you want me to do it, this is what it costs. So this information to me is very practical, because you can set the expectations to your clientele and have confidence in it based upon data, based upon good reasons. Okay. So that's sort of the take-home message from this. So this is the last day for this week. This is Thursday. I'll be back on Monday. Next week, we have 4 papers. I'm going to open them up real quick. We have a couple minutes left here. So next week, I'm going to be talking again about the influence of phosphorus in starter fertilizers on the establishment of tall fescue, a little bit what we talked about today, but another paper that was published just 3 or 4 years ago. I'm going to talk about phosphorus responses, how they vary among cool season turf grasses, from a paper published in 2014. And then another paper just published this last week or month on assessing the fertilizer and pesticide inputs and needs of cool season turf grasses. So next week is a lot of cool season grass, a lot of phosphorus, a lot of established, still staying with it, same theme. We may get to a warm season grass. I would like to get to a warm season grass paper. I have it here, but I can't seem to get to it because there's so many good papers on cool season grasses in front of it. But that's the plan for next week. I probably will I'll do Monday, Tuesday in the morning, and I probably will do the Wednesday evening broadcast. It seemed like that went well last night. So I'll see if I'll do that for a week or two and see if it works for everybody, and if we have more people that are able to participate. Okay, so look forward to that next week. Monday, Tuesday, regular hours, and then Wednesday we'll do in the evening. Oh, there's one question in the chat before I go from Looney. Would there be any negative effects with seeding Kentucky bluegrass in August? Well, the paper that this particular paper seeded Kentucky bluegrass, in the beginning of the paper it says, in fact, let me just go back to it. I'm sorry, I missed that question early on. The beginning of the paper, it says the optimum time for seeding cool season turf grasses is mid-August through September. Okay, so it depends on where you are, Looney. If you are, I'll say for me in Lexington, I don't know where you are, Looney. I apologize for not knowing that. But for me in Lexington, I know what I'm doing with turf grasses. Okay, so I seed sometimes at the 1st of August. I've done it as early as late July, but that comes with a lot of risks. Okay, but I know how to manage those risks, and I'm willing to accept the consequences if I fail. So, are there any consequences to seeding in August? There are if you have a break in your water line, or if you have an unseasonably long hot spell in August after germination. So let's say because it'll germinate quick in August. I like seeding early because I want to get the seed in the ground when the soils are still warm. And the idea being it can germinate, and then as it germinates, the temperature will hopefully start to cool off after it germinates. So I can get that quicker germination because the soils are so warm. But with that comes some risk. Oh, you're in Canada, Looney. Okay. So in your case, I would say, yeah, go for it in August. I think you'd be better served in August, probably. But you have to be willing to put up with and Pythium. That's where I was going, Lush. So up here, I seeded my lawn the first week of August with tall fescue. I had a little section out here where I had to remove a tree, and it germinated really fast. I think it was 6 days. It was germinated. It was super fast for tall fescue. About a week after that, it got Pythium. Okay, and I'm not going to go out and buy a $250 jug of fungicide to take care of Pythium. Okay, so I had to reseed that area that got Pythium because it was so hot. All right, now my neighbor, who I also seeded his lawn, he was on vacation, and he came back 2 weeks after, and I seeded his lawn 2 weeks after my lawn, and it was super hot. It was like 90, 95 degrees here in Lexington when we seeded it. The next week, it dropped 10 degrees. And since then, it's barely got up to 80 here in Lexington. So he hit it perfect. He's had no Pythium. The heat that resulted in the Pythium in my lawn had already declined, and there was no longer any Pythium around. The conditions had changed. And so he's been great. His lawns look fantastic, whereas mine got hit with Pythium because I seeded a week or two early. Okay, so with that comes risk of disease, some diseases. It comes risk of, like, if for some reason you have an abnormal year and it's, say you seed on August 1, and for some reason it's an abnormal year and it stays above 90 out into the end of August, your grass has been there for now a week or two after it germinated in this extreme heat. So you have to be willing to manage that in terms of potential fungicide applications and make sure you're managing the water properly in order to keep the grass alive until it cools off. Okay. So yeah, so Aldo's here too. Okay. So yeah, exactly. So I like seeding in August. Okay. Because I think it gives me another week or two before dormancy in December. And that extra week or two, as this paper just showed, this extra week or two down here, where's the tall fescue? This extra week or two, this is September 1, this bar graph. It gives me a lot more establishment before December. This is December. This gives me almost 100% establishment by December. Well, if I seed, this was in September, and then he rated it in December. If I seed a week or two into August, well, this is actually showing you don't need to because you're still going to be 85, 90% in December 1. But if I seed a week or two into August, I feel I can get that extra week. But it comes with risk. Yes, it does come with risk of disease, and I feel potential catastrophic failure of the grass, primarily due to heat stress on those young seedlings if you're not able to properly manage the water. This is all my opinion, by the way. I'm not showing me any papers on this. Let me go back to me. So this is just my opinion on my experience and my knowledge of the literature that I go out and I can do. I feel I can manage it properly to avoid those risks as best I can. But even knowing what I was doing, I still got Pythium this year. Because, it's not 95 degrees in Lexington every day, guys. Lexington is not a location that gets super hot. Okay. It can, but this year it's been nice and mild, very cool. And then when I seeded, it stayed hot. and I got it. I got nailed. It wasn't very big. It was only a couple little, circles of it, but it got damaged. In fact, I have a photo of it here somewhere. Maybe I can share that on Discord. But last question or last comment. Also, seeding early helps with decline in sunlight and leaf litter later in the season. Yeah, that's a good point, Lush, because I took, those of you who don't, I haven't really shared this with a whole lot of people, but I live on 0.3 acres. And then in the last 5 years, I've removed 30 trees from that 0.3 acres. So I essentially had 100% shade in my lawn. And because of those trees, I really couldn't grow grass because there was no light. But I got so much leaf litter, and the leaves right now in Lexington, this is September 21st, the first day it's the first day of fall. The leaves are already changing. Some of the leaves are already falling. But I've removed 30 trees from my property, and I still have 6 left. And one of the trees is probably an 80 or 90-year-old elm tree, and it has a lot of leaves on it, and it's starting to fall. And I'll still have, even now, I still have leaf litter starting to fall that is going to result in a reduction in light at some point. When it gets heavy enough, if I don't clean them up, if I don't blow them off, that reduction in light due to the leaf litter is something to consider in germination. So that's an excellent point, Lush, is that waiting later, if you have leaf litter on the ground, you're going to have poor seed to soil contact. And if you do get the seed down, if in my case, I would have so many leaves that you can forget mulching them. There was just so many. You could mulch all day long, and it would still be it was so much leaves that you couldn't get the leaves to grow, the new seedlings to really grow through it. It was inhibiting growth, and due to the massive amount of reduction of sunlight, just because there were so many leaves on it. Now that's an extreme case. Okay. I had an extreme case in my lawn where there was just too much. But waiting longer, you do start running into the leaf litter fall when you're in anywhere other than Florida or California or Southern California or Southern Texas or whatever. And in the majority of the rest of the United States where everybody else lives, we do have a leaf litter that's starting right now in Lexington. The leaves are starting to fall right now, and it's going to continue probably for the next month. So that's a good point to keep in mind, Lush. Okay, guys, good questions, good comments. Thank you all for showing up. Sorry, I had a little bit of IT problems at the beginning of the broadcast this morning. I have no idea what happened, but I had to unplug everything, plug it back in. Now we're working. Okay. Yeah, measure. Don't get me wrong. So Lush's comment. Don't get me wrong. We will be seeding into next week. You're in Southeast Massachusetts, but just measure expectations. Yeah, and that can't really be overstated or stated heavily enough. Lush, is that I just got my gutters changed the other day because I had a tree fall on my house, and there was a problem with the gutter when the new one they put on. But the owner came here and explained to me, this is what happened. This is why this occurred. We're going to fix it. It's going to take a week or two, but we're going to come back. So now my expectations are fine. I'm fine with the situation because she set my expectations, and I'm going to expect her to do that, and everything's going to be fine. It's the same thing with grass. As long as the homeowner understands, in my opinion, they're more likely to be accepting of whatever comes their way. As long as they understand you got it, you understand the situation, you're working on it. You understand the limitations if you wait. You understand the risks if you go early, and she makes the decision. The homeowner makes the decision. Yes, go now, or no, wait. Yes, I want to buy fertilizer and put it out, or no, I don't. Ultimately, it's their decision. Is assuming everything's legal to do. But give them the best information you can, and then their expectations should be okay to work within. It's critical. So customer expectations are huge, regardless of any industry you're in. As long as they understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, and it makes good sense, then you're good. Hopefully, this information helped today in terms of dates of seeding. Basically, seed early, high phosphorus soils, fertile soils. You're going to have minimal benefit to applying any starter fertilizer. So be sure to take a soil test on in areas that you're seeding that you don't have any prior knowledge of, or you don't have any prior numbers with. And if the numbers are high, don't worry about putting down phosphorus. If the numbers are low, also be aware you might not see a response, but you have a better chance of seeing a response when the soil phosphorus levels are low. Okay. Keep that in mind. Have a good weekend, guys. I'll be back here on Monday morning. We're going to be over some more establishment fertility stuff. Until then, really appreciate you guys showing up, participating in the chat. It means a lot to me. Have a great weekend. See you guys then. Bye.